This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
.45, this is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by Danushka Madhavala, read by Soundit Avam. The President instructs officials to find out new avenues to attract tourists. The UN World Food Programme chief to visit Sri Lanka soon upon the Prime Minister's invitation. 5 fuel tankers expected to arrive in the next 2 weeks. The UNICEF appeals for $25 million to meet the urgent needs of 1.7 million children affected by the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. The IMF delegation to visit Sri Lanka on June 20th for talks. There is a risk of dengue fever spreading again in the country, and the number of patients reported from the western province is increasing. In foreign news, Mariupol city at risk of major cholera outbreak. And in sports, the third and final T20 will be played between Sri Lanka and Australia today at Pallekele. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa stated that new approaches should be found to attract tourists. The President made these comments at a progress review meeting of the Ministry of Tourism held at the President's house in Fort yesterday. More than 4 million people are directly and indirectly involved in the tourism industry. The tourism industry, which had been crippled by the Easter attack and the COVID-19 epidemic, was on the verge of recovery but was reeling from the crisis. President Rajapaksa said that the tourism sector needs to be rapidly uplifted as it is an important sector that affects the national economy as well as the job security of a large number of people. The President emphasized the importance of correcting misinformation about the country by the Sri Lankan missions overseas. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said that the Executive Director for the UN World Food Programme, David Beasley, is planning to visit Sri Lanka soon. In a tweet, the Premier stated that he has extended an invitation to the World Food Programme's chief to visit the island nation. He also stated that Sri Lanka is appreciative of all the support extended by the programme. The Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Wijesekara, said 5 fuel tankers are expected to be imported within 12 days from today to the 22nd of this month. The minister said that 2 petrol and diesel tankers are expected today and tomorrow, and the last diesel ship under the Indian loan scheme on the 16th. Another petrol tanker is expected to arrive on the 22nd, and the second crude oil tanker before the 20th of this month. The daily requirement of diesel is 5,000 metric tons, but last week between 2,800 and 3,000 metric tons of diesel was distributed. The minister said while the demand for petrol was 3,500 metric tons, more than 2,500 metric tons were released. Kerosene was supplied only to selected fishing and agricultural areas. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
Digital accounts can now be opened in 10 minutes. People's Bank Digital Banking, your ultimate convenience.
The UN has launched an appeal to address the urgent needs of the most vulnerable population in Sri Lanka within the next 4 months. To scale up response to the rising needs of children in the country in the next 7 months, the UNICEF is appealing for $25.3 million to save lives and bring nutrition, healthcare, safe drinking water, education and mental health services to 1.7 million vulnerable children in Sri Lanka. The Prime Minister's office said the International Monetary Fund delegation will visit Sri Lanka on June 20th for talks as the country looks for a loan program from the lender to deal with its worst economic crisis in 7 decades. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was hopeful that a staff-level agreement would be reached by the end of this month, his office said in a statement. The island nation of 22 million people is grappling with shortages of essentials, including fuel, cooking gas and medicines, after it ran out of foreign currency for even basic imports. And that concludes local news.
Debit card, mobile and internet banking along with cardless cash facilities can now be open in just 10 minutes with no form filling with People's Bank Digital Banking. banking.
Thank you very much for letting me know. It took less time than finishing my morning cup of tea.
People's Bank Digital Banking, your ultimate convenience.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
The National Dengue Control Unit Director Dr. Sudath Samaravira said that there is a risk of dengue fever spreading again in the country and the number of patients reported from the Western Province is increasing. He said 26,622 patients were reported during this year, but only 2,416 patients were reported during the past 8 days across the country. Kalambu, Gampaha, Kalutara, Kandy, Gaul, Jaffna, Ratnapura and the Kagala districts have been identified as the high-risk dengue spreading zones and came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight, the government has issued a circular declaring Monday as a special public holiday. It has been issued by the Ministry of Public Administration. The decision has been taken considering the prevailing transport difficulties and electricity issues and came to you in Watchlight. On to a bulletin of world news making headlines this morning. The Mariupol city at risk of major cholera outbreak. UK court allows Rwanda asylum removal flight planned for Tuesday. Plastic-munching superworms offer hope for recycling. The Ukrainian city of Mariupol, all but destroyed by weeks of shelling and now under Russian control, is at risk of a major cholera outbreak, the UK Defence Ministry says. Much of the city's infrastructure is damaged or destroyed and water has mixed with sewage, according to the UN. Cholera is usually caught by eating or drinking contaminated food or water and is closely linked to poor sanitation. Uncollected dead bodies and rubbish add to the unsanitary conditions. There have been outbreaks of the disease in Mariupol before, and isolated cases have been reported in the past month. A flight to take asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda next Tuesday has been allowed to go ahead by the High Court. Campaigners failed in an initial legal bid to halt the removals to the East African country, but have confirmed they will take the case to the Court of Appeal on Monday. Under the policy, some of those entering the UK illegally will be flown to Rwanda to apply for asylum there. About 31 people have been told they may be on the first flight. There will be a full judicial review where the High Court will hear a challenge to the policy as a whole before the end of July, it had. A special species of insect larva with a taste for plastic could help revolutionize recycling, researchers say. Australian scientists have found the Zopabas morio, commonly known as a superworm, can survive on a diet of polystyrene. They believe the beetle larva digests the plastic through a gut enzyme. That could be significant for advancements in recycling, says one of the study's authors. The University of Queensland team fed 3 groups of superworms different diets over 3 weeks. The batch that ate polystyrene even put on weight. The team found several enzymes in the superworm's gut have the ability to degrade polystyrene and styrene. Both are common in takeaway containers and other items such as insulation and car parts. Back to the headlines of the world news. The Mariupol city at risk of major cholera outbreak. UK court allows Rwanda asylum removal flight planned for Tuesday. And plastic-munching superworms offer hope for recycling. That concludes this bulletin of world news and on to development news. The private sector credit improved by 478 billion rupees in March 2022, sustaining the positive growth momentum for the 20th consecutive month. First Capital Research said state credit reflected a net borrowing of 759.6 billion rupees, the report added. Foreign reserves improved to $1.9 billion in May 2022 relative to $1.8 billion in April 2022 over deferment of payments to India under an in-Asian clearing union. And that came to you in development news.
Sports news is brought to you by
Sampath Bank. We present your future.
The third and final T20 match between Sri Lanka and Australia will be played at the Pallekele International Cricket Stadium today. The match begins at 7 p.m. Australia has already won the T20 series by winning the first 2 matches. And the SLBC is ready to bring live broadcasts of the matches of the tournament. And that came to you in sports news. We'll look at business news next.
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Sri Lanka's leading private sector bank, HNB plc, expanded its Walk the Talk initiative to promote a more eco-friendly, healthy and economical mode of transportation amongst its employees on World Bicycle Day in a bid to encourage simple interventions with major potential to reduce the carbon footprints from the bank and its employees. HNB employees across the island cycle to their workplace on World Bicycle Day, promoting the alternative mode of transportation given the fuel crisis experienced by the Sri Lankans today. And the bank took extra measures to offer bicycles at discounted rates for employees who wish to switch to one of the world's oldest modes of transportation. That's business news. Economic news up next.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
On to economic news. Prices in the US rose faster than expected last month as rising energy and food costs pushed inflation to the highest rate since 1981. The annual inflation rate rose 8.6% in May, the Labour Department said, after easing in April. The rising cost of living has been squeezing households and putting pressure on policymakers to bring the issue under control. The US Central Bank has been raising interest rates since March. That's economic news, and on to the weather report. Several spells of showers will occur in the western, Sabaragamu and northwestern provinces and in the Kandy, Nuwara, Galle and Matara districts. Showers or thundershowers may occur at a few places in the Uva province and in the Batiklo and Ampara districts during the afternoon or night. Fairly strong winds, about 40 kilometers per hour, can be expected at times in the northern, north central and northwestern provinces and in the Hambantota and Trincomalee districts. To conclude this bulletin of news, a recap of the headlines. The President instructs officials to find out new avenues to attract tourists. The UN World Food Programme chief to visit Sri Lanka soon on the Prime Minister's invitation. 5 fuel tankers expected to arrive in the next 2 weeks. UNICEF appeals for $25 million to meet the urgent needs of 1.7 million children affected by the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. An IMF delegation to visit Sri Lanka on June 20th for talks. There's a risk of dengue fever spreading again in the country, and the number of patients reported from the western province is increasing. The Mariupol city at risk of a major cholera outbreak. And the third and final T20 will be played between Sri Lanka and Australia today in Pallekele. And that concludes this morning's news broadcast.